Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Patricia Monna, Intuitive Consulting. Today I have a wonderful guest, Rob Sullivan, who is a book author. He has a podcast. He also has his book on audio as well as in hard copy for sale now. It's called A Trek Within, and I'm dying to delve into this conversation and see how your life has been completely changed. So, welcome, Rob. Thank you so much for coming today.
Oh, thanks for having me on your show. Yeah, no.
Absolutely. So, what prompted you to write this book?
So this was not anything that I expected to write. It really largely happened. And what we have to go back to like 1990-ish, 1994. It was around that time I was working in Chicago at the Chicago Board of Trade in the options pits, and I was diagnosed with narcolepsy. And narcolepsy, for people who don't know, is a sleep disorder where you just end up taking a lot of naps, or some people fall asleep uncontrollably. Fortunately, I didn't have it that bad. But my dad was a doc at Northwestern Memorial in Chicago, so first line of defense was always, head right to the neurologist or whatever, the local expert was, whomever other. And it was interesting because after literally a year of feeling like a guinea pig, I had gone through sleep studies and genetic testing and all kinds of stuff. They came back and they said, you have all the genes for narcolepsy, and you are going to be on Prozac and Ritalin for the rest of your life. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm not. I just wasn't willing to do that. I was raised obviously around Western medicine. I believe in it. I accept it. I'm not one of these people who just like throws it out completely.
Mhm.
But I knew in my heart there was a way to find a cure for that didn't involve going through if the regular channels can't do it, then I'm going to find another way. That was my attitude.
Good on ya. I was a palliative oncology nurse for 13 years before I jumped over and changed my career. And I have to tell you, my eyes were really, really, really opened to big pharma and to the hospitals and the system in 2020. So I hear you on that. Yeah, I spoke very loud and proud that I did not get the you know what, just because it didn't feel right to me. It felt like they were trying to sell us or feed us something that just did not belong in the system, that it wasn't good. So I totally appreciate your journey.
Yeah, good for you. Well, it's interesting because you and my dad actually have a fair amount in common. I watched an interview you did on Dangerous Thoughts with Manu, and you talked about your ability to smell cancer, which
Yes.
was something that I immediately was so happy to hear that because the only other person I've ever known who could do that was my dad. And
Wow.
he used to talk about that. He could do that. He could tell if a woman was pregnant before she even knew, which was wild. I remember him telling me he was at a party and there were, these two people there, who were best friends. And he went up to one of the best friends and he said, when's Carolyn having her baby? And Becky looked at him and she's like, she's not having a baby. And she's like, yeah, she is. Yeah. And like 2 weeks later, she called my dad up and she goes, how the hell do you know that? She just found out, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the energy changes. It does. It absolutely does. It changes when a person is sick or when a person is pregnant. If a person is happy or angry, it literally changes their field of energy. So it sounds like your dad had extrasensory perception as well.
Yeah, he did. Well, it was interesting because I remember him telling me that if he didn't know what was wrong with the patient, he would run the back of his hand, along their body to figure out where the source of the issue was. I know that isn't something he learned at Northwestern Medical School.
So your
Um,
dad's a doctor.
yeah, he was internal medicine. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah, but
amazing.
yeah, but he was just he's very open-minded. So when the whole narcolepsy thing happened, and he and I talked about it. I said, I'm not interested in being on these drugs for the rest of my life. And I went, and he was very supportive. So I went to, I have a friend who's a medical intuitive. I went there. I did, Chinese herbalists, acupuncturists. And finally, I found, after a year or two of searching, I found a guy in New York. And his name was Jay Adekama. He unfortunately died a couple of years ago. He was a ninth generation Japanese healer, and his son now does it too. and he had his own healing method that like takes Reiki to a different place, basically would be the best way to describe it. Because I have studied Reiki. I'm a Reiki master. I don't practice it so much. I do it, on myself or when people pick up on the fact that I can do it, which is
Yeah.
always fascinating to me. But his, the things that I've experienced with Reiki, getting treatments or whatever, what he did with me was like, I mean, literally, I felt like in
Wow.
one of the treatments, I felt like every cell in my body was on fire. And I was sitting up in a chair, much like, I am right now. And I remember when his assistant put her hand on my sternum, the second her hand touched me, it was like fire, but not in a bad way. But if she'd continued on any longer, I would have passed out. And then it was over, and I looked at her. I'm like, as soon as she pulled her hand away, the whole feeling went away. And I looked at her and I said, "What was that?" And she looked at me and she's like, "Oh yeah, I noticed that too." Like there had been a breeze in the room. And I'm like, "No, no, no, no. What just happened? That was
Yeah.
intense." And she said, "Well," she goes, "I don't know, actually." She said, "I all I can tell you is I was treating your soul center." And she said, when my mother went through this treatment, she said she had an experience similar to what you just went through, and she said that was the turning point in her therapy. Now her mother was getting treated for rheumatoid arthritis, and she had it so badly she couldn't walk across a room. And when Jay finished with her, she was playing tennis. And when I heard that story, I knew that he was going to be the one that was going to heal me. I knew it, and it took 3 months of hands-on treatment, but sure enough, it worked.
Wow. So you no longer have that problem of falling asleep all the time.
No, no, but it was interesting. That was only the first step in the whole journey, because I wrote it out. Was communicating with a friend of mine from college who I found out was an acupuncturist, and he had asked me how I got interested in acupuncture and things like that. And I was going to write out the story. I remembered that I had actually written the whole journey a couple of years before for some healing magazine that I think never really got off the ground. And every time I got a new computer, that was like the one thing that I moved with me because I always knew that I was going to use it. And when
Mm.
he started asking me that, and as I was typing the answer, I'm like, wait a minute, I already have this. So in my very first ever Facebook post, like note, I just just put up the article that I had written, and immediately, and this is before the it was the tractor beam like feature it is now, where people check it a lot.
Mm.
I only, I was very new to Facebook. This is what was this? Probably 1990, mid 90s maybe, and it was wild. I started getting friend requests from friends of friends, and people were like, I read your story, I heard about your story, I want to read it." A friend of mine from high school, she was the one who really was the catalyst in a lot of ways because her name was Carolyn, and she said, "I've always wanted to believe this, but," and she said, "and if it weren't coming from you, I probably still wouldn't." And she said, "Thank you for opening my eyes." And it was in that moment, that, like I said, the seed had been planted, and over time, I started realizing, and what I really came to the conclusion of is that I needed to tell this story, not because of anything other than the fact that when I look at people who are interested in the category, or if you look at a potential audience, for a book like, because the book is not just about healing, it's about dreams, it's about intuition, it's about
Mm.
psychics, lives. It's everything that I was not raised to believe, but that I've come to embrace. And so every chapter has a different topic. And as I was doing it, I realized that a lot of the male authors in the category are psychologists. Nothing wrong with that, but that's a special brand of crazy.
I
And
agree.
yeah, and
Totally.
so yeah, I mean, I couldn't find any male authors, or I've not come across any who, I started my career in advertising. I worked as a trader at the Chicago Board of Trade. I am not your typical new age writer.
Mhm.
And I started thinking about it. I thought, I felt almost like a responsibility, which is a weird word for that, but I felt like I needed to share because it was going to give people a different perspective. I didn't write the book to build my psychology practice. Yeah, I don't have one. In fact, there's more risk to me in writing it than in not because I currently do sales training and lead workshops for companies, and there's always a chance that a company I'm going to work with is going to be like, "Wow, he's jumped off the deep end," and fortunately, that's not been the case at all. People have been very accepting of it, but
Mhm.
but there was more risk in writing it than not. But it was interesting because all of these little things along the way prepared me for what was really the eventual, like the missing chapter, because the book took like 10 years to write. And the missing chapter was the journey I went through with lymphoma. So when I heard about your, being an oncology nurse and stuff, you have a special place in my heart. You're everybody who
Thank you. It's definitely a calling, for sure it is. But I truly feel that it's such an honor to be able to be there and be in the room or hold a person's hand as they're taking their last breath. It really is. It's almost like you're a gatekeeper for someone or something. It's a very spiritual moment for me when I experienced that in my nursing career. Yeah, but it's a calling because I mean I understand it's got a very high rate of burnout. And to be honest with you, I left nursing because I ended up getting diagnosed with a really super rare, weird condition called erythromelalgia that affects all the nerves in my arms from the elbows down and my knees, both of them from my knees down to my feet, affects all the nerves. And so at one point, I was like this. I was locked. I couldn't move. I was in bed for 2 years, physio, medication, all that stuff. And I actually came across Rife therapy, which is another alternative therapy. Maybe you know about it. Have you ever heard of Rife therapy?
I have
Oh,
not, no.
oh God, you got to look into it. It gave me my life back. I was 210 pounds walking with a cane when I found it. Oh yeah, if I showed you pictures, you'd be like, that's not you. And it doesn't feel like me. That was the worst time in my life. But Rife therapy, it's frequency therapy. So if you think of the way doctors get rid of kidney stones, what they do is they match the vibration of the kidney stone with its own oscillation rate. It's called a MOR, mortality oscillation rate. It blows up, you pee it out, and that's how you get rid of a kidney stone. Nowadays, that's what they do. It's all frequencies. Well, I've got a machine that emits specific frequencies for different ailments, and it's got over 40,000 different ailments or different things that's programmed into the machine. Everything from viruses, pathogens, anxiety, depression, nerve regeneration, you name it. Cancer is even in this Rife machine. And the frequencies go through you. You hold these two poles, the frequencies go through you, and it's giving your body exactly what you need. That's how I healed myself. But to cut a long story short, you and I do have something in common because it was the worst time in my life. I got diagnosed with this. I lost both of my parents within a year and a half of each other. I was done. I was done, checked out kind of thing for years. Didn't want to get up. Don't know how I raised my kids looking back. But to fast forward, this is where we have to bless the BS because look at what got us to where we are today. Because that whole experience was my catalyst to be able to jump into this career because I couldn't be on my feet anymore. I needed something where I could sit. And plus, this, whatever this is, it's like it came online. It came online through the depression, through the anxiety. It was reaching out to God. For me, I was brought up Christian. So for me, it was reaching out to God in that time of need, going, okay, I'm done. You better start talking to me and showing me the mission because I'm out of here. And that's when it just kind of really came online for me. And so I think that it's through the hardships that we endure with you and your diagnosis. Look how it changed you. Look at
Oh,
how even writing this book, if it inspires one person, 10 people, a million people, that right there is part of the mission of why this had to happen.
yeah. I agree 100% because that was one of the things, I was, when I first got diagnosed, my parents were, I love my parents, they're great. They were raised by depression era folks.
Yeah,
And
same
so
with my parents. Yeah.
yes, so there's a big scarcity mentality around that. And I
Yeah.
remember, it was a very well-meaning sort of thing, but my parents were legit concerned because I was working, making most of my income as a contract trainer, and they're like, don't tell anybody about this. When I got diagnosed with lymphoma, they're like, don't tell anybody because you might not get hired and all that stuff. And I'm like, I thought to myself, at first I was, they planted this little seed of fear, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to be bald in 3 weeks. I don't see this being a big secret, and so, and knowing the power of energy, I'm like, I don't want people thinking that I'm about to check out. I need to control the narrative of what
Mm.
they're thinking, and so I was very open about what I was going through, and it was great being open about it because when you do that, when you have a different attitude about it, and I was very fortunate. One of my mentors was going through metastatic breast cancer at the same time, and she and I used to talk all the time, and we had a different vocabulary around it. You know, we talked about the importance of not saying that you have anything. You
Yeah.
know that I'm experiencing tumors. I'm going through treatment. I don't have anything because if you have it, it's a possession and you're holding on to it, which is a really, really bad idea energetically. And so I never, didn't now, it wasn't like that immediately. There was a lot of fear right at the beginning, but then, because there was a lot of uncertainty when they knew that I had tumors. There was a 5 by 7 by 8 centimeter tumor sitting on my heart. Um, and
Oh.
it was, that was the one that I was like, okay, and they were like, we think we know what it is, but we're not exactly sure. And then, they did the additional testing to determine, what it was. But and they were confident that they could treat it, and which is why I went through the traditional, that was Western medicine all the way.
Mhm.
Except I worked with Jay Atacama on the to take care of the symptoms because like tongue pain, which I know
Oh,
you're familiar with that.
yep.
Um,
You
yeah,
had
that
that, eh?
Oh my, yeah. Well, after I went through like 500 hours of chemo or something like that. I was on the R-EPOC regimen, and at toward the end of that, because that was, the doses go up, and then, the last, I remember him saying to me right before the last dose, I think it was the sixth treatment, he said something, he said, your body has had all the chemo it can handle. He said, I wish you were not doing the last treatment. But, I went through it, I decided I'm going to be coachable, I'll go, play by the protocol and went through it. But that was when the tongue pain kicked in. And I remember one day I texted his office and I'm like, I need a treatment because it was really hurting. And I mean, not like off the charts pain, but it was very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And for people who don't know what it is, imagine biting your tongue and having that localized pain across half of your tongue. That's tongue pain. And
Oh.
it was wild because when I texted, his assistants were like, he's treating somebody right now. We'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. And I was literally going back to unlock my bike, leaving the oncologist's office. And as I'm putting the chain around my bike seat, it was like a light switch went off and it was decreased immediately by 50%. And I'm like, Jay just treated me. And then I got a text and said, Jay just treated you. I'm like, yeah, I know he did.
Wow, that is amazing. I definitely believe in I have my Reiki level 2. I'm not a Reiki master, but I have my level 2. But all I needed that for was to just open up that something something. And whenever I do my guided meditations in studio, I go around and I do some energy healing and energetic realignments on people. And it's a shift. That's all that's needed, right? It's a shift in the energy, which opens up the passageways and gets things flowing again and gives the body a chance to heal itself because the body is extremely intelligent. It really is. I did the same thing where with COVID, I was like, not today, Satan, you're not on my timeline. And I never got it. Right. So I'm healthy as a horse since 2011. I haven't had anything. And so, but I think it is that shift in our belief systems, shift from the inside out. That's what it creates. And so, if we don't allow the anger and the why me and the victimization to sink into ourselves, we have a chance to really shine and show people how we can reverse things and heal ourselves. I look younger today than I did in 2009. I can't even look at those
Yeah.
pictures. It's so bad, but that's like I said, for me, it was my huge catalyst. If I had a time, if I had the time, I'd write a book. But yeah, what were your spiritual belief systems before this? I know you've
Yeah.
experienced healing energy and stuff, but what do you pray? Do you
Yeah.
meditate?
So I was raised Catholic, and I had a very strong relationship with going to mass and all that stuff. But around that same time of making my first communion and doing all that stuff, I had an equally strong relationship with McDonald's, which was right across the street. So, I'd always sneak over there. And I laugh when I think about it now. I would go get, always French fries, but sometimes a quarter pounder or whatever. And then I would sneak it in the classroom. Okay, anybody who's been within 100 miles of a McDonald's bag knows that you can't sneak McDonald's into
Yeah,
a cathedral without everybody knowing. So the fact that I thought I was getting away with anything is just mind-boggling. But anyway, uh,
it's
over
funny.
the time, what happened was I was I prayed a lot, mostly like, I remember being 14 when my grandfather died, and I remember praying a lot that he had gone to heaven. I was very worried that for some reason he hadn't, and I don't even remember exactly why I was worried about that. Um, but then, like a year later, he appeared in a dream, and I asked him, I'm like, "Where have you been?" And he's like, "I was in heaven." And I'm like, "Okay, great. Now I don't have to pray every night for that."
Nice.
Yeah, which is cool. But the real spiritual point for me was I was a volunteer for 34 years at Children's Memorial in Chicago, now called Lurie Children's. And there was a little girl who's she was in step down intensive care unit. And I met her when she was like 6 months old. And this little girl, you would love her. She just lit up. She had that energy that just lit up the room. And I mean, like she could smile and your back would be turned and you'd know she was smiling. It was like that kind of thing.
Aw. Yeah.
And but she couldn't be held because she had, there was a number of issues that, things were going on with her. But I would go and play with her every week for a year that she was in the hospital. And then one time, the doctors had a meeting with her family, and they're like, we're not going to be able to do anything for her. I'm going to call her Annabelle. That was not her real name. They said, we're not going to do anything for her. It would be better if she died at home. And, of course, she's about a year and a half at this point. And we're all heartbroken, everybody who loved her, and because I lived a block away from the hospital at that point. So even on days where they needed extra volunteers, I was often there more than once a week, just
Yeah.
and I made a beeline for her because there was just this connection that we had. Well, I remember it was a Saturday afternoon. It was about 3 o'clock, and I'm walking up the street to the beach. This is about a couple weeks after she had been discharged, and all of a sudden, I just got this feeling. It was unbelievable. It was like I was getting this big, huge hug, and I get a chill every time I tell the story, just like I am now. And I knew in that moment that she had just died, and that she came to say goodbye. And I don't know. It would be interesting if it happened now, uh, how I would, how I would interpret it, or if I would pick up more than I did. But all I felt was that she was saying, thank you for being my friend. Was the message that I was getting. And so, that night, of course, I went home and I just bawled my eyes out because I just love that little girl. And then the next Thursday, I was at the hospital, and Jamie, my supervisor, looks at me and she said, "We got some sad news this week." And I said, "Yeah, Annabelle died, didn't she?" And she's like, "Yeah, how'd you know that?" I said, "It was Saturday around 3 o'clock, wasn't it?" And she's like,
Wow.
"How did you know that?" I was like, "I just knew."
Yeah, she's definitely coming to say goodbye. They do. They absolutely do. And some of them will even stick around to see their own funeral. I've seen that before. I was brought up Christian and to believe in God, but that was my parents' paradigm. And but in the Christian religion, it's psychics are evil. So of course we tried to pray this away like you wouldn't believe. But you can't pray away your gifts and abilities. And I have to say that when I took training on remote viewing and astral projection, that really, really changed things for me. Because once you know how to walk through walls, and I'm dead serious, like I can peel myself out of my meat suit, go to a target, get information, and bring it back. That's next level. Oh my God, I will never take anything in this 3D reality so serious ever again because I know that this is just temporary. Is you know what I mean? This is just a stopover for all of us. If it wasn't, we'd be stuck here forever. And I do believe that our soul does evolve. I've heard that from spirit. But yeah, what a beautiful story. Thank you so much for
Sure.
sharing.
Oh, absolutely. Were those the classes that you took at the Monroe Institute? I heard you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I heard you
Yeah.
talk about that. It really, I felt like I'd heard of it before, but I didn't know anything about it. But after hearing your story and some of the things that you shared, I was like, oh, I gotta look into
You can go. Anybody can go. That's the cool thing.
that.
Anybody can go. And the crazy thing is you don't know who you're sitting beside because they still train the FBI. They still train with the CIA. They train with the who's who. I'll tell you that. We're not allowed to name drop or anything like that, but we were sitting beside some very highly influential people when I was being trained by Joe McMonagle there. And I've been trained by Paul Elder, who's also an amazing teacher. It was Paul Elder actually that taught me how to walk through walls and get out of my body. There's a series of steps, and if you can learn the steps and learn what to look for, and then at that point will yourself to sit up or roll out, you can come out. It's not hard. It's just who tries, who knows how to try. It's like playing the piano. If you've never seen a piano before, it's not like you're going to be playing in an orchestra. You know what I mean? So it takes time and focus and dedication and changing belief systems, because if you go into it in a state of fear, don't bother. You're wasting your money. You won't be able to get out and actually experience it. Fear is a roadblock. It completely closes the door. Same with disbelief. If you don't believe that you can, inside of yourself, you actually cannot convince yourself that you believe in it until you actually genuinely believe in it. It's so finicky. It really is. It's a frequency. And so you go into this altered state called the hypnagogic state. And it's called mind awake, body asleep. So it's literally tricking your body into believing that you're sleeping, and then it's willing yourself out. And I personally think that the more you can visualize, which is using your third eye, I didn't know that when I was young. My mom used to read me books that had no pictures in it. And I asked her one time, why do you do that? I hate that you read us stories with no pictures. And she's like, no, I want you to visualize the characters, visualize, see it in your mind. And I look back and go, wow, that was part of my training that she didn't even know she was giving me, because every single thing that a person says to me, I'm visualizing exactly what they're saying, because I know that that visualization will lead to the truth of what they are saying. And that's how I can feel the energy shift of a person who's full of crap versus who's telling the truth, or like you said with death, I can feel it. I can feel them hanging out of their body. Actually, it's weird, but you can feel their soul half hanging out of their body when they're passing away naturally. But yes, it also has a smell. It smells almost like rotting peanut butter. Like it's got a sweet smell to it, but very pungent and just rotting. It's just yuck. So, did your dad ever describe what it was like for him when he smelt it? When he smelt death?
No, he said there were only certain kinds that worked with. But he was very intuitive. And that's one of the things that I'm most proud of. And I think I got, some of that from him. And I know I got a lot of it from my mom too, because she's very intuitive also. But I remember him telling me one time that he had a patient who was a relatively young guy. I want to say he was probably in his like mid-30s. And he went to my dad one day and he said, I think I'm dying. And it was, and my dad, took him seriously, did a full exam, and but they were he was legitimately concerned, so he put him in the hospital for observation, and he died that night, and no one has any idea why. And so
Wow.
kudos
I
to
mean,
my
now
dad
you
for,
know.
yeah, yeah. And it's like, I don't know if you ever read Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl's book.
Yes, I
Yeah,
love that book. Such
yeah, and how
a
he talked about, yeah, he could see when in their eyes when they checked out.
yeah, yeah, and that's totally, totally, totally true. 100%. It's an energy. You can feel it for sure. So
Yeah.
tell me what your book is about. We should talk about A Trek Within.
Yeah, so it was never meant to be autobiographical, but a lot of the things obviously did happen to me because it was things that how my beliefs changed around dreams, around past lives, around other things. And I was very fortunate to have an editor that I was working with, and she was one of those people that I wanted to reach. She was one of those people who's on the edge because I do believe in that category, there's people who are going to buy. It's not like should I buy this book or that book. It's like I'm going to buy this book and that book. There are
Yeah,
people that you couldn't pay to read the book.
yeah,
And then there are the people in the middle who they've always wanted to believe it, but they're not really sure. And I always felt like that was my audience.
yeah.
And and so the editor was one of those people, and she said, do you know other people who've had these sorts of experiences? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And she said, let's get some of their stories, which was one of the best contributions to the book. So I'd say, I don't know, there's probably like 70 different stories in there from other people. And so there's vanishing twin stories, two from the perspective of the remaining twin and one from the perspective of the mother, which are really cool. and things that people don't realize happen. One of my favorite stories is one that did happen to me. It was my life was saved by a dream, and I always and one of my whole points in writing the book was to just show people that there are so many things that happen in our lives, and if we pay attention, then we're going to be richer for it and perhaps live to see another day, in my case. And if we avoid it, then we're going to miss it completely. And they could be simple little things. I remember I had a dream about a guy named Asa Baber, who was a columnist. And Asa and I had met, one time, and he was very helpful in helping me get my first agent. And then later, when I was writing this book, I came across a dream that I had written down that he was in, and in the dream, he was in the hospital. Now, that wouldn't have been that big. And when I wrote it down, I obviously didn't really think twice about it, which was unfortunate. This is an example of missing the sign, because I realized later that he had died of Lou Gehrig's disease. And based on the day that he died and when I had the dream, he was almost certainly in hospice or in the hospital when that happened. And if only I had awakened from that dream and thought, I should call him. I should check in and say hello. And I didn't. And I don't beat myself up for that. I mean, that's life is a learning process. But when this other dream happened, and this was wild, I was standing on the ocean, and this was I do make a distinction between dreams and visions, and this was really almost more of a vision because even if I hadn't written it down, I could tell you every detail about the dream because I remember it clearly. And to me, that's the vision, as opposed to the dream that you're like brushing your teeth, going, "Wait a minute, what did I just dream?" No,
Yeah.
this was one. I'm standing on the edge of the water, like the ocean, and the water's really rough, and the sky is dark, and you could tell that there had been a storm, and the lifeguard next to me communicates to me telepathically, which is also at least for me, that's also a sign that it's a vision as opposed to a dream, because I've had that happen one other time too. And in that moment, or actually three times I've had that happen, but he communicated to me. He said, "Don't be thrown off by the relative calm. It's going to get worse again before it gets better." And then he turns around and he starts running at top speed away from the water. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if the lifeguard's running away from the water, I'm not sticking around. So I turn around and I start running too. And by the time I catch up to him, there's a wall to my left. And the wall is like 50 feet high. And it's those huge cinder blocks all stacked up on top of each other. And the wall is about that thick. So as I get to the wall, this huge wave crashes into the wall, and I can see to the other side of the wall because I'm right at the end of it, and the wall is blocking about 90% of the water. And then the rest of it, there's like seaweed and water coming through. And then I looked up and I could see water in the distance. So I must have been on some sort of a peninsula. And then I woke up and I was just very struck, by that. And that dream stayed with me all day. Well, a couple of things happened during the day. I went to the gym, was working out. Afterwards, I had pulled a muscle or something, and so my collarbone was bugging me a bit. And I go, my next after the gym, I go to the orthopedic surgeon to get a cortisone injection in my ankle. And I happened to ask him. I said, "Why, if my ankle is bone on bone, why is the pain 3 or 4 inches up my leg?" And he said, he looked at me, he goes, "Oh, that's referred pain." And he's like, like if you were having a heart attack or something. I'm
Mhm.
like, "Oh, okay, whatever." So then my next appointment was at the endodontist, and my dentist wanted me to get a 360 X-ray of a top tooth that he was concerned might have a hairline crack in it. And the endodontist says, he goes, "Is that tooth sensitive to hot and cold?" I said, "That one is not, but the one immediately below it is." And he goes, "That's referred pain." And I'm thinking to myself, why am I hearing about referred pain twice in one day? And for
Yeah.
your viewers who don't know what that is, like one time that I had it when I was going through chemo, they gave me a shot in my left arm up by my elbow, but the pain that I felt was in my hand when they hit the nerve. So it's when you feel pain that's in a place where it's not, uh,
Travels.
what's going on. And so I, was thinking about that and I was like, okay, that was weird. And then it was going through, I had a couple client meetings and whatnot. And around 6 o'clock, I'm hungry. I'm walking up Grand Avenue in Chicago and I get to the corner of Grand and Ogden on my way for shrimp tacos. And this collarbone thing comes back,
Mhm.
which was not painful. It was just like a weird little cramp. And so I checked in with my intuition because the dream immediately came to me. I'm like, okay, I felt that in the morning. It was gone all day and now it's back. And all I'm thinking of the dream with the lifeguard saying it'll, get calm before it'll get worse again before it gets better.
Mm.
So it sounds dramatic, but I stopped at the corner and I looked up and I silently said to myself, or not to myself, but I silently, prayed. I said, do I need to get this checked out right now, or can I go get shrimp tacos? That was my exact question. And the
Mm.
answer came back immediately, you need to get it checked out. So I jump in a Uber, go over to urgent care, and they hook me up and they're like, "Yeah, you're having a heart attack." And it turned out that the artery on the left wall of my heart was 90% blocked,
Oh,
exactly like the vision in the dream with the wall on my left that was blocking 90% of the wave. When I told my roommate from college that, who is an emergency room physician, he goes, looked at me, he goes, "Dude, that's the widowmaker." He goes, "You are the luckiest guy I know." You
yeah.
know, and it was like, and I had no idea, but I get a chill just even thinking about that because it's like, had I
No
not paid
doubt.
attention to that sign, I'd
Yeah.
have, I wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah. Well, and Spirit does have an amazing way of showing us when we need to get something checked out. It's interesting. You reminded me of a client I had where she came in, she was wearing pants and a sweatshirt. She was wearing Lululemon pants, fully, down her ankles. And I was scanning her body because a break in the field or something that isn't flowing correctly, I can pick it up immediately. And so I was scanning her and I said to her, right below her knee on her leg, I said, "You have a mole there that's not good." I said, "You need to get that checked out." And she looked at me, she's like, "I just had my moles checked out about 3 months ago, so it's only once a year. I'm not gonna worry about it." And so she didn't pull up her leg, or she didn't pull up her pants or anything. And I said, "Well, I'm just telling you, I see that there's something there that does look cancerous. So please, if something does magically appear over these next few months, go get it checked out." Well, lo and behold, about 3 months goes by and she's in the shower and she notices a mole, something that looks different on her leg. And my words came in to her mind, but she still waited, I think, about 6 more weeks
Oh,
to get into the same doctor to make sure. And sure enough, by the time that she went in, it had spread, and the doctor said, "If you'd waited any longer, we would have had to amputate your leg." So I saved her leg by letting her know, "Hey, I know you're saying that there's nothing there right now, but please don't mess around. When you see it change, get your butt in there." So I'm glad that she listened and got it checked out when she saw it. But at the same time, if I give advice like that, you guys need to listen. I'm saying it for a reason. So, yeah, because it does. It's a break in the field, and then all I need to do, thank God for my nursing background, because I know, the body inside, literally, and out. So then I go into the area of concern and I start asking questions, and then I download the answer on what it is. So I can, yeah, it's really easy once you understand energy and how to work with it. Possibly even if you can, how to see it, you'll know how to treat it. Right? It's a break in the field. So, and really, I believe that illness, we are mind, body, soul, and it
mhm.
starts in the soul. Illness starts in the soul before it enters the mind, screaming at the mind, and you're not listening. So then the body starts screaming if we haven't been listening to our mind or our soul. And that's when it becomes physical, right? So we need to treat it on all three levels, even, because think about it. Think of how much emotional and spiritual awakening and healing that you got from getting diagnosed with lymphoma, right? It changes you.
Absolutely.
You can't think the same and look at the world the same.
No, not at all. And it was, it's weird to say it was a beautiful experience. And it was beautiful in the sense that the way that it opened me up to love and connection and things like that. And I remember even one of the people that I work with, one of the salespeople at this organization, she was watching me train one day afterwards, and she said, "You were a great trainer before." She's like, "You are off the charts now." She's like, "I don't know what happened when you went through that, but you are a totally different person." But it was interesting to me, the whole thing, because you are, there's a lot that's going on. And in that case, at the beginning, I remember sitting in the oncologist's office with his nurse assistant, and I was very just curious about stuff. I mean, largely because, at our dinner table growing up, my dad was always talking about medical stuff. He was so passionate about, being a doctor and whatnot. And so I was asking them, what's known about what causes lymphoma? And his Betsy, his nurse, looked at me and she's like, "You didn't cause this." And I'm thinking to myself, it's really interesting that you reacted like that because that wasn't the question I asked. It was more like an investigative reporter. But my also immediate reaction was, "Yes, I did."
Mhm.
Um, and I do believe that because a year before that, I had met this woman on a scuba trip, and I really thought we had this connection, and uh, it was not just I've dated enough people to know there was definitely something there. And then when it didn't work out, there was a emotional circling of the drain that happened. And I don't blame her for that. I'm responsible for how I digest life. But the reality is you can't have negative energy
Yeah.
flowing through your body for a year and not expect that you're going to have a consequence from it. And it wasn't a great, as dense as I am when it comes to metaphors, the fact that the biggest tumor, the tumors that I noticed were in my neck. And I thought it was a communication sort of thing. But then, when we did the scans and they showed that the biggest tumor actually was the one on my heart,
Wow.
that symbolism was not lost.
Yeah, that's a big one. And every part of the body absolutely represents um if it's ill, it's stuck trauma. It is. Like even they say breast cancer is related to mother issues that have either been passed down genetically. And even in the Bible it talks about the sins of the father being passed down 7 generations. They're not necessarily talking about sins, they're talking about genetics, right? And that's why you'll see families full of cancer or families full of, I don't know, other psychological issues, or even spousal abuse that comes down, or alcoholism that comes down. And you see it in groups of family. Well, you also see families of doctors, families of nurses, families of light workers. Our genetics plays a big role in it. But I do believe in quantum healing. I do believe that we can rewire our instructions on our programming in our cells, but that's a whole other conversation. Um, but no, every part of the body, like they say that fear and loathing and angers is liver. So if people having stuck liver issues, fatty liver, gotta check your anger and see where you're floating at, because that absolutely, it gets clogged in the filter system, in the filtration system, right? So yeah, the lungs represent grief. And it's so true. After my parents passed away, I had chronic pneumonia for about 6 months. So it was awful.
Well,
So it
and the
stuff.
yeah, the communication issues too. Like I've always known that if I get congested or something like that, that it's usually a conversation that I'm resisting having, that the words are trapped somehow.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, this is a wild one too. This is the other vision that I had that where I had the story requires a little bit of a explanation, but there was a guy that I knew who I'd recently been introduced to. This is a number of years ago. He was a musician, really great guy, incredible performer. And I play a little guitar, and I was very excited because he was teaching me, some songs on guitar. He's like, I want you to play on my next album, which if anybody has ever heard me play can attest to the fact that I'm very not great. And so the fact that he wanted to do that was really cool. And so our
Yeah.
friendship was, developing and stuff. And he then all of a sudden he stopped talking to me. And it was very weird because the last conversation that we had, we were on our way to see this band, the Nadas. And I still remember he was asking me about a particular woman that I had dated a few months before.
Mhm.
And he'd asked me if we were still dating. And I said no. And in fact, I encouraged him to ask her out because I knew that she was interested in him. And so then I found out that they were dating, but then I never heard from him. And he had a big birthday coming up. So I called her up and I said, "Hey, I haven't heard from him in a while. And I know he's got a birthday coming up, and I don't want to forget about it." And she said, "Yeah, and you're not going to hear from him either." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, he thinks you lied to him." I said, "Lied to him about what?" And she said, "About us." I said, "I'm confused." And she said, "Well, he said that he asked you if we had ever dated and you told him no." And of course, she sounds angry too because it was like I denied our short relationship. But I said, "No." I said, "I misunderstood the question if that's the case." I said, "I thought he was asking if we were still dating. I thought he knew that had dated." And I said, "And I encouraged him to ask you out, and I guess you guys are dating, so I failed to see the harm in this." And she goes, well, she said he has a little policy that he won't date anybody that any of his friends have ever dated. And I'm like, what, are we 11? But I put my judgment aside and I said, you know what? I'm going to play the bigger person here. I'm going to call him up and just own it. It takes two to miscommunicate.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's easier to just say, hey, it's my fault. So I did that. I left him a message, never heard from him. And I knew that I was never going to hear from him. I just knew intuitively that that
Mhm.
was not going to happen. And so week goes by, that was, it all happened on a Tuesday. And at first I was really hurt and I felt embarrassed and just all these weird emotions. And then I started getting really angry and frustrated. And by the end of the week, I had swollen glands, I had a fever. I called my dad up and he goes, and I said, I described the symptoms and he said, oh, you got the really bad flu going around. And I said, well, what can I do about it? He said, nothing. It's a virus. I said, I said, well, I got a gig out of town on Wednesday. And he said, you're not going to be there. He said, my patients who've had this have had it for 2 weeks. He said, you better find a backup. And he said, just go to bed. So I go to bed and I'm delirious from the fever. And I prayed. I said, God, I need help. I need to let go of this anger. And I know that the way that I would let go of it would be to have a conversation, but the conversation that I need to have is never going to happen. And I know that I need help. And so this is where the vision came in. It was really wild. You know the Vitruvian Man, the Da Vinci thing with the circle and the guy with the arms and legs out. It's like a
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So that shows up in as a hologram in front of me. And this guy, who's about 6'5" and 300 some pounds, he's a big dude, shows up in that hologram. Superimposed on him in the hologram is my 3-year-old nephew. And I literally laughed out loud. I said, that's a really interesting image, but I don't get it. And the word, this is one of the only times I've ever heard a voice, and the voice was not male, it was not female, it was just a voice. And the exact words were, he is at the emotional development level of a 3-year-old. It is not his fault. Be more compassionate.
Wow.
And I'm like, what a beautiful message. And I just got a chill even just telling you that.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he died a few years later. So we never did, ever talk again as I predicted. I didn't think that was going to happen. And I don't think I manifested us not talking. I just knew
Yeah.
intuitively that it wasn't going to happen.
Mm.
And and it was wild because like that night, I woke up twice in the middle of the night, drenched with sweat. And I woke up in the morning and I was totally cured. Fine. Felt
Wow. Just
and
from
it was,
letting go.
yeah, pardon?
I said just from letting go.
Yeah, exactly. Because and I knew that fever and those swollen glands and everything, I knew that was coming from anger. I knew it was. And I know, I don't think every illness necessarily, you can, I certainly don't, there's a lot of people who don't accept that they have a role in their illness. And I'm not going to tell somebody who's dying of pancreatic cancer that it's their fault,
Mm.
because I don't know that. Maybe it was environmental. I
Yeah.
know in my cases, what I've gone through, I was at cause for it.
Wow. Yeah, for me, I think it was definitely losing my parents and not, I don't know, something triggered it. It's genetic in my family, and unfortunately, all three of my boys have it too. So I hope they're okay in the future, but I'm teaching them how to heal, right? So, but no, I think it's very important that, that we do take accountability for how we live and also the memories that we leave behind, in the minds of others, because, words can stay with a person long, long, long after they're spoken. And, even that scenario of that argument taking place and everything, if you didn't forgive it, it stick with you, it stays with you. And we actually do replay our memories when we get to the other side. We go through that life review where we see everything, but we see it through the eyes, ears, five senses of everyone we've ever interacted with. So when I get up to this point in my life, I will feel you scratching your head as I'm talking to you through the camera. You know what I mean? And how I leave you, I will feel that energy on the other side when I'm there. And I do believe that that's, the karmic, um, the karmic view of things. And, because if we hurt someone, we're gonna feel that as though I am you and you are me and we are one. So I think,
Exactly.
yeah, I think that's an
Well, and
important.
that's why I was so grateful in that moment for that vision because I literally never, I can look you in the eye and say, I never felt a single bit of hostility or anger or anything toward him after that, because that
Good.
vision was the perfect one. Because it's not rational to be mad at a 3-year-old for
Yeah.
something they're not capable of doing. And so just because somebody's 47 years older and 300 pounds heavier does not make
Yeah.
them automatic. And there's no judgment in that.
Hmm.
I'm not saying he was a bad person. He wasn't a bad person. He was a lovely person, a very talented guy.
Yeah.
In that one area, that was something that was going on for him. And so if you can be compassionate, then you can let go of that, anger
Excellent. So you talk about all of this stuff and more in
and
your
more.
book. And where is it available? Where can people get your book?
Uh, you can any independent bookstore can order it. Certainly, you can get it on Amazon. And if you're interested in the audio version, you can do the Audible. Certainly
Oh,
has it. But if you want, my website, atrekwithin.com, you can download a free sample chapter. Actually, it's more than a chapter. There's a preface, intro, and then a sample chapter. And then you can either download it in PDF form or you can listen to it as an audio.
oh, very
That
cool.
way you can check it out and see if it resonates, because it's not going to be for everybody, but if it's something that people are interested in, that's a good way to check it out.
Awesome. Perfect. And if anyone wants to get a hold of you, how do they do that? Through your website?
Uh, just if you go to atrekwithin.com, you can find me there. I'm on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find there. So just Rob Sullivan. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect, perfect. Well, Rob, with that being said, I can't thank you enough for coming on today and discussing all of this stuff. It was really cool to be able to go back and forth with our experiences. And I haven't read your book yet, but I'm going to. I want to be able to read your book and see and be able to go, oh, that's the story. So, yeah, I think I will go out and get it. It'll be good to read on the beach next week because I'm heading to Hawaii after this.
Oh, nice,
Or
nice.
not Hawaii. I don't know why I
Oh,
said
Mexico, I
Hawaii.
was gonna
I don't,
yeah.
sorry. I don't know why I said Hawaii. I'm going to Mexico. I'm going to
Yeah,
the
that's
Maya
what I thought.
Riviera. Oh, I don't know why I said Hawaii.
Yeah.
Same beach.
Well,
It's all beach and 30 degrees. That's all that matters. So
exactly. Oh, I'm excited for you. That'll be great.
thank you. Well, it was wonderful having you on. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's a privilege, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
And to the viewers out there watching us, thank you so much for listening to the two of us. And if you haven't liked and subscribed to the channel, it helps to grow things. So please feel free to do that. Rob, thanks again. It's been an absolute pleasure interviewing you here today. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye for now.